Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're the show that takes all that dense research, those articles, those source materials you've got piled up, and, well, we do the reading for you, giving you the core knowledge.
That's the plan.
And our mission today is pretty fundamental. We're looking at the very roots of education in Nigeria. What was going on before significant external influences, before Arabic or Western systems arrived.
It's about establishing that baseline, understanding what was already there.
Exactly. What were the structures, the philosophies, the goals for educating young Nigerians back then?
And it's more than just a history lesson, isn't it? It's really a corrective. We have to tackle this controversial starting point you find in some of the older commentary.
What's that?
Well, the source material highlights how early foreign observers often claim there was basically, no education in Nigeria before their systems came along.
Seriously, like a complete blank slate.
Pretty much. They saw a lack of Western-style schools or widespread Arabic texts in some areas and just assumed nothing was happening educationally.
That's quite an assumption.
Yeah.
For complex societies.
It's deeply flawed, historically inaccurate, culturally dismissive, really. So this deep dive, using our sources, is set to directly challenge that.
Okay.
Our goal here is to show that Nigeria already had rich, effective, and yes, quite peculiar educational systems long before colonialism. We're talking indigenous traditions, specialized higher learning, and then the arrival and integration of Islamic education.
Right, setting that whole cultural foundation.
Precisely, for everything that came later.
Okay, so to do this right, especially when we talk about something like traditional education, we need to be super clear on our terms. What do the sources mean by history itself? How do they define it so it's not just legends?
That's a great place to start. The documents are quite specific. History isn't just storytelling or fabrication. It's defined as a systematic, coherent, and crucially unbiased account of past events.
Okay, systematic and unbiased.
Yeah, it's about reconstructing the true picture. Sequentially, factually, connecting yesterday with today and tomorrow. It's meant to provide real developmental insight for the present, not just entertain.
Got it. And education.
Yeah.
In these traditional contexts, we're clearly moving beyond just classrooms and textbooks.
Oh, absolutely. The source material defines education much more broadly. It's the total development of the individual.
Total development.
Across every aspect. Cognitive, that's your thinking. Affective, your values, attitudes, emotions. Psychomotor, physical skills. And even psychoproductive, using those skills to actually create things, contribute economically.
Wow. Okay, so it's incredibly holistic.
It is. It's about desirable behavioral change, guided by mature adults, respecting the child's abilities, but also society's needs. And it's lifelong.
So it's not just what you know, it's who you become, how you act, how you contribute. That seems to be the core.
That's the essence of the indigenous philosophy we're finding here. And the sources helpfully break down the ways learning happened into three forms. We all know formal education, right?
Sure. Schools, universities, planned curriculum, structured.
Exactly. Fixed entry points, certificates, the whole system. But for traditional Nigeria, the other two were arguably much more dominant.
Which were?
Well, there's informal education. This is the huge ongoing learning that happens outside formal structures.
Like at home.
At home, yes, but also in the market, playing with peers, just observing life. It's often unconscious, happening all the time. It's where you pick up so much basic life experience, develop natural talents.
Okay, constantly absorbing. And the third type?
That's non-formal education. This one's kind of a bridge. It has some structure, maybe a planned curriculum or specific instructors, but it happens outside the regular school system.
Like apprenticeships or workshops.
Exactly like apprenticeships. Or maybe a specific workshop, a correspondence course back in the day, distance learning now. It's usually focused on equipping someone with a specific skill set, often temporary or complementary, like learning a trade as an adult. Very task-oriented.
Got it. Okay, let's dive into that core traditional system then. Before Islam, before the West, what was the guiding philosophy? You said it wasn't static, right?
Absolutely not static. That's key. The educational worldview, the philosophy, it varied depending on the time period, the specific place, the people.
So learning in ancient Nok culture would be different from the Oyo Empire.
Hugely different. Their environments, their political structures, their immediate needs were different. Think Nok versus Oyo versus Benin with its amazing art versus the Kanuri people focused on desert trade. Education adapted.
But were there unifying beliefs? underlying principles across these different groups.
Yes, the sources highlight some core tenets.
Yeah.
A fundamental belief in the supremacy of God, the creator.
Okay.
But alongside that, a belief in minor gods or deities, often seen as messengers or forces of nature, and, crucially for education, a deep reverence for the ancestors.
The ancestors as intermediaries.
Exactly. They were seen as the vital link between the creator and the living community, the family, the clan. Their approval was essential.
So the spiritual world wasn't just parallel to the physical. It was completely interwoven. That must change everything about teaching and learning.
It absolutely does. Every action potentially has a spiritual consequence. This feeds directly into their view of human nature, this dual aspect, physical and spiritual.
Right.
Which means knowledge transfer itself had to be systematic, yes, but also deeply moral and contextual. The big emphasis, as we'll see, was on character training.
Character training. Morality specific to the family or tribe.
Precisely. And delivered through very practical, often symbolic means. Oral literature stories, proverbs, ceremonies, direct observation, poetry. It wasn't abstract learning.
If the whole worldview is about maintaining balance with God, nature, and the ancestors, it makes total sense that the number one goal wouldn't be, say, individual intellectual achievement as we might think of it now.
You've nailed it. The sources are emphatic. The most important goal of traditional Nigerian education was character training.
The effective domain, as you defined it earlier.
That was king. Developing desirable moral qualities, things like sociability, being part of the community, courage, humility, obedience to elders and customs. That came first.
Before practical skills, even.
In terms of priority, yes. If you train someone to be a brilliant farmer, but they were arrogant or disrespectful, the education was considered a failure. Character was the foundation.
That focus on humility and obedience must have been vital for social cohesion, especially with that respect for elders being so central.
It was absolutely necessary for a functional, cooperative community. But beyond character, the sources list other key aims.
Okay, what else?
Preserving the cultural heritage was huge. The laws, the institutions, the language itself. Adapting to the physical environment, learning to farm, fish, hunt, use local resources effectively. Preparing children for their specific adult roles within the community.
Gender roles, specific trades.
Exactly. Also, developing a child's latent skills, their natural talents, providing vocational training tied to the community's needs, and reinforcing that respect for elders and authority. The whole system aimed to perpetuate the culture, keep it strong and stable.
That idea of perpetuation leads straight to one of the key characteristics the sources mention. Traditional education was inherently conservative.
Yes, and that's both its strength and, from a modern perspective perhaps, its weakness. It was generally resistant to rapid change.
Focus on continuity.
Exactly. The goal was to maintain the established order, the cultural ways that had worked for generations. If grandfather's method of farming sustained the community, that's what the child learned. Innovation wasn't the primary goal.
But what happened if conditions changed drastically? A drought, a new disease? Did this conservatism hinder adaptation? That feels like a potential problem.
That's the tension, isn't it? The sources suggest the system wasn't completely rigid. Change could happen, but it was slow, incremental, and usually had to be sanctioned by the elders, the keepers of tradition.
So a new farming technique wouldn't just be adopted overnight.
Unlikely. It would need to be discussed, perhaps tested carefully, maybe even integrated through some ritual to ensure the ancestors approved. Pragmatic, yes, but cautious. Very cautious.
Another characteristic you mentioned was its social and collective nature.
Right. This meant education wasn't just the parents' job. The entire community was involved.
Everyone.
Pretty much. Uncles, aunts, older siblings, peers, elders, people in the market. Everyone played a role in shaping the child, teaching them, correcting them. It made the learning constant, reinforced from all sides.
And you stressed it was integrated and practical?
Completely. You couldn't separate learning a craft from the ethics involved or the necessary rituals. It was all one package. And practical meant learning by doing.
Not abstract theory.
Very little abstract theory. You learned about farming by farming. You learned about fishing by fishing. Knowledge was applied immediately in real situations. Observation, imitation, direct participation were key.
And finally, it was a lifelong process.
Yes, education didn't stop at a certain age or after an initiation ceremony. Learning continued throughout life, adapting to new roles and circumstances.
Okay, let's talk content. You said it's vocational and geographical. So the curriculum was basically dictated by where you live.
Largely, yes. If you lived near a river, you learned fishing, making nets, building canoes, understanding the river's moods. In the forest, it was farming, hunting, trapping, and knowledge of plants and animals.
Makes sense. Practical needs.
Totally. But it wasn't only vocational. There was physical training. Wrestling was common, running, games requiring agility. Arts and crafts were vital: carving, weaving, pottery, music, dance. Intellectual training happened too: counting systems, complex strategy games like Io or Wari.
And history. How is that passed on without widespread writing?
Critically important, passed on through oral tradition, folklore, myths, legends, epic poems, genealogies recited by elders. These weren't just stories, they contained the community's history, values, and moral lessons.
So how was all this taught? The methods sound very active.
It's extremely active. The bedrock methods were modeling, watching elders or masters' imitation, and direct participation. Kids learned by helping out, gradually taking on more complex tasks.
And apprenticeships for specific skills.
Yes, the apprenticeship model was crucial for specialized trades like blacksmithing, carving, or traditional medicine. A young person would be formally attached to a master for years.
What about the moral and intellectual side? You mentioned oral literature.
That did a lot of the heavy lifting there. Oral literature, riddles, proverbs, myths, legends. These weren't just entertainment. Riddles sharpened the mind. Proverbs were like concentrated packets of wisdom and moral guidance.
Can you give an example? How does a proverb teach something like, say, humility?
Okay, think of a proverb like, the stream that rushes fast often runs shallow.
Right.
It's not just about water, it's a commentary on impatience, on showing off perhaps. It subtly teaches the value of depth, calmness, maybe humility over noisy, superficial action. Easy to remember, applies to many situations, especially when correcting a child. The wisdom is embedded.
That's clever. Packaged for memory and behavior. Now, you mentioned it's lifelong, starting even before birth. Let's map out those stages of development the sources identify.
Okay, the trajectory is quite clear in the documents. It starts with infancy, 0–5 years, and fascinatingly, sometimes before birth.
The prenatal taboos.
Exactly. That example from Etchland, the pregnant mother avoiding tortoise meat to prevent the child having a crafty character, that's literally trying to shape disposition in utero. It's preventative character training.
Amazing. And after birth.
Focuses on basic needs, communication through petting, singing, lullabies. Early social learning happens through immediate reward for good behavior, maybe a frown or sharp word for antisocial acts like biting. Very direct feedback.
Then comes childhood, 6–12 years. The world opens up.
Big time. This is the discovery phase, moving beyond just the mother or immediate family. Play is dominant, but it's learning play. Imitation is huge.
Mimicking adults.
Constantly. Little boys farming alongside their fathers, little girls going to market with their mothers. They're internalizing roles, and they're learning concrete facts about their environment, names of plants, insects, paths, dangers. The environment is the classroom.
Next up, adolescence, 12 years onwards. Preparation for adulthood kicks in.
With renewed intensity, yes. This is serious preparation for becoming a husband, wife, parent, fully contributing member. It involves much closer supervision by elders or mentors.
Is this where initiation ceremonies fit in?
Often, yes. Initiation ceremonies are a major educational tool here. They test knowledge, endurance, courage. They mark the transition to adulthood, confirming the young person is ready. There's also a deeper dive into proverbs, folklore, and history relevant to adult responsibilities and decision-making.
And finally, adulthood. Learning doesn't stop.
Never stops. Adults learn from parents-in-law after marriage, from elders in council meetings, from resolving disputes, from environmental events like famines or floods. Life itself continues the education.
Looking back at this whole traditional model, the advantages seem pretty clear. It produced people who fit into their society, right?
Absolutely. The sources highlight key strengths. It created functional members of society. Unemployment was minimal because training was directly linked to community needs.
Practical skills.
Exactly. It instilled high levels of discipline and social responsibility. It promoted spiritual growth and moral uprightness through that constant connection to God. And the ancestors' fear of supernatural consequences was a powerful motivator. And it ensured education was relevant, meeting the society's actual needs and values.
But you also mentioned limitations, the flip side of those strengths, maybe. Especially that conservative nature.
Definitely. The documents point out disadvantages, too. It could be too rigid, too resistant to change, potentially hindering adaptation to new challenges.
Like new technologies or ideas from outside.
Precisely. The scope of the curriculum was also seen as limited, heavily focused on the practical and informal, maybe lacking in deep theoretical exploration or broader knowledge of the world. And a big structural weakness was the lack of uniform standards.
Meaning the quality varied a lot.
Hugely. Depending on the skill of the individual teacher, the specific master craftsman, or the particular community's resources and focus, there was no external benchmark or certification. Your qualification was your demonstrated ability within that local context.
That lack of standardization might explain why very specialized knowledge needed its own distinct track. This brings us to what the sources call higher education in traditional society. Sounds very different.
It really is. This is where you see the complexity and depth of traditional intellectual life. The sources actually classify traditional education into three broad levels.
Okay, what are they?
First is education for conformity. This is the basic stuff everyone needed. Family history, local geography, language, basic proverbs, core values, essential knowledge for just belonging. Exactly. Second is education for occupation or self-reliance. This is the general vocational training, farming, hunting, fishing, basic crafts, home maintenance, often followed traditional gender lines, preparing people for typical adult roles, still pretty accessible.
And the third level is the higher ed.
Yes, education for special occupation. And this is where it gets exclusive. Reserved, the sources say, for those entitled by birthright or chosen through special selection or possessing unique privilege, not open to everyone.
So what subjects fell under this elite category? What was the advanced curriculum?
Things like mastering complex family crafts passed down through generations, maybe intricate weaving patterns or secret techniques in metalworking. Religious priesthood was definitely higher education requiring deep knowledge of theology, cosmology, complex rituals, divination.
And traditional medicine.
Absolutely central. Traditional medicine in all its forms, herbalism, bone setting, rudimentary surgery, faith healing, massage, hydrotherapy, was considered a highly specialized field requiring extensive training and often initiation.
Who provided this advanced, often secret training? Where did it happen?
This is where secret cults or societies come into play, according to the sources.
Secret societies as universities.
In a way, yes. They functioned as institutions of higher learning, offering intellectual and practical training far beyond what was common knowledge.
What was the focus of their curriculum?
Mastering secret knowledge and power, whether that power was seen as spiritual, philosophical, or practical. It involved deep dives into native philosophy, the science of the natural world as they understood it, and the complex theology of animism or local deities.
And getting in wasn't easy.
Highly restricted. Admission required demonstrating not just aptitude, but also the capacity for profound understanding and, critically, the absolute ability to keep secrets. Oaths of secrecy were paramount.
The knowledge itself was the source of power and status, so it had to be guarded.
Precisely. Exclusivity maintained the authority and the mystique of the initiated practitioners or priests.
Let's zoom in on traditional medicine, because the sources treat it almost like a distinct scientific system. The philosophy behind it seems radically different from modern Western medicine. What's the core belief about why people get sick?
The foundational belief, as presented, is that illness isn't primarily caused by germs or random chance. It's caused by a violation of natural or moral laws.
Violations like what?
Things like adultery, breaking a taboo, disrespecting elders or ancestors, failing in dietary rules, general social or sexual misconduct. Illness is seen as a consequence, a sign of disharmony in the spiritual and social order.
So the cure isn't just about fixing the body.
No, the cure has to address the root cause, the violation. It follows nature's laws, using elements from the environment, herbs, water, heat, to help restore that broken balance.
But how did they differentiate? I mean, a broken leg seems pretty physical, not necessarily caused by adultery. How do they diagnose?
That's a crucial point. For obvious physical trauma like a broken bone, they had practical methods splinting, setting bones. But even then, the question might linger. Why did this happen to this person now? There might still be an underlying cause sought.
And that's where divination comes in.
Exactly. Divination wasn't usually the cure itself, but it was the essential diagnostic tool. It was used to uncover the hidden, often supernatural or moral, causes behind an illness, a string of misfortunes, or even a death.
To see if witchcraft was involved or an angry spirit.
Precisely. Or which specific taboo was broken. The diviner's findings would then guide the practitioner, the herbalist or priest, towards the correct treatment, ensuring they addressed both the physical symptoms and the perceived spiritual or moral root.
Okay, so diagnosis is key. Once they have a diagnosis, the sources list about 5 main treatment methods. Let's start with the most familiar, Herbalism.
Right. Herbalism is described as the systematic use of plants to restore health, using different parts, leaves, roots, bark, flowers, seeds, juices. Sometimes animal parts were included too.
What's the theory behind how the herbs work?
This is fascinating. The core idea isn't that the herb is the cure, like an antibiotic killing bacteria. Instead, the belief is that the human body has its own powerful inherent curative force.
An inner healing power.
Yes. And the herbal preparations are seen as merely assisting or boosting that natural force. They help the body heal itself. The herbalist is essentially supporting the body's own resilience.
Interesting distinction. Okay, what's next?
Massaging. Methodical manipulation of the body's soft tissues. Used for pain relief, improving circulation, relaxation, treating strains or dislocations. A very hands-on therapy.
Then there's faith healing. This sounds like it requires the patient's belief.
Absolutely crucial. This method primarily addresses emotional, psychological, or psychosomatic problems. The practice relies heavily on the patient's faith, often involving confession of sins or wrongdoings, and the symbolic use of things like native chalk or special water.
The sources give a specific example, right?
Yeah.
Igbeku in Edo State.
Yes, Igbeku is presented as a traditional religious system with a whole hierarchy: gods, saints, priests. It offers a very structured approach to faith healing.
What does the patient actually go through in Igbeku healing?
It's quite comprehensive. It typically starts with the patient confessing their sins or perceived transgressions publicly. This act of confession is seen as vital, addressing the moral violation that might be causing the illness.
A form of psychotherapy almost.
You could see parallels. Then the treatment involves intense communal prayers, chanting specific incantations, and often quite rigorous rhythmic dancing exercises, sometimes leading to a trance-like state. It's a holistic process engaging the spiritual, psychological, and physical aspects of the person to restore balance and reintegrate them into the community.
Sounds very powerful, especially for issues maybe rooted in guilt or social anxiety.
Definitely seems designed for that. The last two methods involve temperature, hydrotherapy, and heat therapy.
Water and fire.
Basically, yes. Hydrotherapy uses water in various forms: cold baths, steam inhalation, hot baths, often infused with specific herbs, used for things like rheumatism, fevers, maybe respiratory issues like asthma.
And heat therapy.
This involves applying heat, usually generated from a fire, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly. The belief was that the heat itself contained mysterious curative agents.
How is it thought to work?
By stimulating organs, improving blood flow, and helping the body expel impurities through sweating. Again, assisting the body's natural processes.
Okay, so from basic character training for everyone up to these highly specialized, often secret medical and priestly degrees, the traditional system was clearly comprehensive. It was designed for its own context.
Fully integrated, meeting indigenous needs according to indigenous philosophies.
But as you mentioned earlier, centuries before European colonialism really took hold, another major educational force arrived, especially in the North, a system that was text-based and highly organized: Islamic education.
That's right. This marks the first significant external influence, tracing back to around the 11th century AD, and its presence clearly shows that advanced, structured, literate learning was already established in parts of Nigeria long before the West arrived.
Let's start with its foundation. The philosophy, the aims, where do they come from?
They stem directly from the religion itself. Islam, meaning submission to the will of Allah and peace. Education, therefore, is derived directly from the Holy Quran.
The ultimate source text.
Absolutely. Philosophically, it provides a complete framework. Metaphysics. Allah is almighty, the sole creator. Humans are created inherently good and innocent, serving as Allah's representatives, or Khalifa, on earth.
Okay. And how does it view knowledge itself? How do we learn epistemology?
It recognizes two main types of knowledge. There's revealed knowledge, which comes directly from Allah via the Quran, seen as perfect and immutable truth. And there's acquired knowledge, which humans gain through observation, reason, study of the world. Both are valued and necessary.
And values. Axiology.
A huge emphasis on values. Truthfulness, justice, fairness, humility, kindness, generosity, steadfastness. These are paramount. The entire educational process is aimed at instilling these.
So the ultimate goal ties back to that idea of being Allah's representative, the Khalifa.
Exactly. The primary aim of Islamic education is to produce a good Muslim, someone who embodies those values and acts as Allah's responsible Khalifa on earth, promoting good, forbidding evil, upholding justice. It's fundamentally about moral and spiritual development alongside intellectual growth.
The core text is the Quran. But the sources mention something interesting, how other academic fields grew around the Quran, specifically to support its study.
That's a fascinating point about how need drives intellectual development. Because preserving the Quran's exact wording and meaning was so critical, whole disciplines essentially evolved to serve that purpose.
Like what?
Arabic grammar, syntax, and morphology became highly developed to ensure accurate reading. The science of Quranic commentary, tafsir, emerged to explain its meanings. The art of recitation, tajwid, became incredibly refined. Lexicography, dictionary making was needed to define every word precisely, all to protect and understand the core text.
So the language studies served the religious text.
Primarily, yes. Alongside the Quran, the Hadith, recorded sayings and actions of Prophet Muhammad, is also a crucial source, providing context and practical examples.
So while it's rooted in religion, the scope of learning wasn't narrow.
Not at all. The sources stress that Islamic scholarship, guided by the Quran and Hadith, historically covered a vast range. Law, theology, yes, but also economics, social sciences, administration, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, literature, art, all viewed within that Islamic framework.
How was this taught? What were the pedagogical methods favored in Islamic tradition?
The approach recommended is fundamentally humanistic. Teachers are urged to be gentle, patient, lenient, compassionate.
Not harsh.
Ideally, no. The recommended methods include things like storytelling, especially prophetic stories, questioning, a bit like Socratic dialogue, using metaphors and analogies, lots of repetition for memorization, especially of the Quran, using illustrations, demonstrations, even field trips sometimes.
Were punishment and reward used?
Yes, both were considered acceptable tools, but the overall emphasis was meant to be on encouragement, kindness, and leading by example.
Okay, let's trace its path into Nigeria. When and how did it arrive? You said around the 11th century.
That's the time frame given. It primarily entered through the ancient Kanem-Borno Empire, which covered parts of modern Borno, Bauchi, Yobe, Adamawa states.
For where?
From North Africa and the Sahara regions, traveling along the well-established trans-Saharan trade routes. Trade and diplomacy were the main conduits. Knowledge literally traveled with the caravans.
As traders and scholars came together.
Exactly. By the 12th century, the sources note that renowned Muslim scholars, some coming from major centers like Timbuktu in Mali, were established in Kanem. From there, Islamic learning spread gradually to other major northern centers like Kano and Katsina, which were also key hubs for trade and politics.
And then there was a major surge in the 19th century.
A huge one. Sheikh Usman Dan Fodio's jihad, starting in 1804, was pivotal. While it had political and social dimensions, it was also fundamentally an educational and religious reform movement.
How so?
It aimed to purify Islamic practice, combat syncretism, mixing Islam with traditional beliefs, and promote rigorous Islamic scholarship and education based strictly on the Quran and Sunnah. This led to a massive expansion and deepening of Islamic learning across the north and even into parts of the southwest.
Okay, now let's fast forward. How's that traditional Quranic system, often based in a teacher's home or local mosque, look today? Especially with the rise of modern secular state education, it must have adapted.
It definitely has. Initially, yes, it was very informal, small groups studying with a malam in his home, maybe contributing food or small payments, no fixed curriculum duration. But the sources identify basically 4 categories today, showing this evolution.
That's the first. Still the old style.
Pretty much. The ILQU model. This still operates often in the teacher's home or a simple structure. Standards vary wildly. Learning duration is flexible, often relies on pupils showing appreciation through gifts or cash. Still very common, especially for basic Quranic literacy.
Then it gets more formalized.
Yes. The second type is semi-formal. These might use actual classrooms, maybe benches. There's more emphasis specifically on Islamic studies subjects, often using Arabic as the language of instruction. But again, standards can differ greatly.
The third category sounds like it bridges into the mainstream system, the formal Wasenico prep model.
Right. And just to remind listeners, WASI and NICO are the main secondary school leaving exams in Nigeria and West Africa. This type of Quranic school functions much more like a conventional secondary school.
With timetables and official syllabuses.
Exactly. They use government-approved syllabuses, have set timetables, and actively prepare students to sit for those external WASI or NECO exams. They might teach many standard subjects, sometimes still using Arabic as the medium of instruction, but the structure is formal.
And the fourth category makes the full leap.
That's the English medium category. These function essentially like any other formal secondary school in Nigeria following the national curriculum, but they include Islamic studies as a key subject, and critically, they use English as the primary language of instruction.
And these are the main feeders into university now.
According to the sources, yes. This English medium model produces the majority of students from the Islamic education sector who go on to tertiary institutions, universities, polytechnics, colleges of education. It shows a significant integration.
And the subjects themselves, Arabic and Islamic studies, are they recognized in the national system?
Fully. Arabic and Islamic religious knowledge, IRK or IS, gained official recognition for school certification exams back in the late 1950s and 1960s.
So quite early on.
Relatively early, yes. And today, Islamic studies is either a core or an elective subject within the national policy on education at junior and senior secondary levels. Plus, you can get full bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees in Arabic and Islamic studies at universities across Nigeria. It's fully embedded.
Okay, so pulling this all together, what we've seen is not a blank slate, but a really complex layering of educational philosophies and systems existing long before the final wave of Western influence.
Absolutely. We've got the indigenous traditional system deeply integrated with culture, focused on character, community, and perpetuation. Very practical, very holistic.
Then this specialized, exclusive higher education within that tradition. The secret societies, the deep dives into medicine, priesthood, guarded knowledge.
Right, and layered onto, or alongside that, particularly in the North but spreading, you have the formal, text-based, divinely inspired Islamic system with its own comprehensive worldview, emphasis on morality, sophisticated scholarly tradition, and standardized texts. Nigeria's educational history is already complex before the 20th century really gets going.
It completely reframes that starting point. The sources make it clear. Nigerians were always being educated, systematically and purposefully, according to the standards and needs of their own cultures. That narrative of no education just doesn't hold water.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Education was always tied directly to cultural practice, to morality, to making a living, to be a functioning member of society. It just looked different from European models.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, thinking about that pre-colonial complexity, you had the traditional systems emphasizing community and adaptation, sometimes quite localized. Then you have the Islamic system emphasizing universal scriptures, standardization, and a different kind of moral framework. There must have already been tensions and interactions between these two, right?
Undoubtedly. Different approaches to authority, knowledge transmission, ultimate goals. So the provocative thought, maybe building on these sources, is this. How did this already existing multi-layered educational landscape, this complex tapestry of indigenous and Islamic systems, how did it then react to shape, resist, and ultimately negotiate with the third major force, the one that brought state-sponsored, secularized, Western-style schooling?
Wow.
That encounter, that three-way negotiation between traditional ways, Islamic learning, and Western models, that feels like the real crucible where modern Nigerian education, policy, and even identity were forged, and maybe still being forged today.
A fascinating question indeed. Something for all of you to consider. That's all the time we have for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us.